Whispers from the Dark. Zohitka Church stood at the far end of the village, isolated from the main road by a narrow, winding path that seemed to disappear into the thick woods. Locals avoided it, passing hushed rumors from one generation to the next, about the old priest, Father Gavril, and the unspeakable events that had taken place within its stone walls. I had heard the stories all my life, but it wasn't until Father Gavril was found dead that the whispers turned into something darker. The church had always been cold and unwelcoming, but now it felt alive with something far worse. His body had been discovered in the early hours of a gray morning, sprawled in front of the altar, face down, his robes soaked in blood. The authorities said it was a brutal murder, his body bearing deep cuts and gashes. But those who had been brave enough to see the crime scene said otherwise. They claimed that his death was not caused by any blade, but by something much more sinister. I stood at the base of the path, staring up at the church. Despite the cool evening breeze, sweat prickled down the back of my neck. I didn't want to be there, but something compelled me, perhaps curiosity or something darker I couldn't yet explain. The village was silent as I began my ascent, the dirt path uneven beneath my feet. The woods on either side pressed in tightly as if trying to block out the sky. The closer I got, the heavier the air seemed to grow, like the very air had taken on a suffocating weight. The door to the church creaked open at the slightest touch. Inside, the dim light of dusk filtered through the broken windows, casting long shadows across the floor. The air was thick with the scent of dust and something else, something metallic. Blood. I stepped forward, my footsteps echoing off the stone walls, the sound far too loud in the stillness. The nave stretched out before me, empty save for the large wooden cross at the front, looming like a sentinel over the room. And there, in the center of the floor, was the dark, dried stain where Father Gavril's body had been found. I knelt, running my hand over the rough stone. The air seemed colder here, as if the church itself remembered the horror that had taken place. My fingers brushed against something, a crack in the floor. I leaned closer, squinting in the fading light, and saw that it wasn't just a crack. It was a mark carved deep into the stone. It was a symbol, one I didn't recognize, and yet, it filled me with a sense of dread. A sudden noise behind me, like a low, breathy whisper, sent a jolt of fear down my spine. I stood quickly, heart racing, and turned toward the altar. That's when I saw it. A shadowy figure, standing in the doorway leading to the back of the church. It didn't move, but I could feel its eyes, watching me. My breath caught in my throat, and I took a step back, my feet barely making contact with the ground as I felt the chill seep deeper into my bones. Then the whispering began again. Low, unintelligible voices that seemed to come from every corner of the church. The figure didn't move, but the air around me seemed to pulse with energy, a deep hum vibrating in my chest. I took another step back, my hand trembling as I reached into my bag for my phone, desperate to shine some light into the growing darkness. But the moment I touched it, the voices stopped. Everything fell silent. The figure was gone. I stood there, my pulse pounding in my ears, but the silence was worse than the whispers. It was as if the church was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. I wasn't sure if I wanted to know what that was. I turned on my heel, heart racing, ready to leave the church behind. Whatever I had seen, or thought I had seen, was enough. I didn't care about solving Father Gavril's murder anymore. The whispers, the figure, the oppressive weight of the place. It was too much. I had to get out. But as I pushed open the heavy door, something was wrong. The path that led back to the village was gone. I blinked, rubbing my eyes as if the darkness was playing tricks on me, but no matter how long I stared, the familiar dirt road had vanished. In its place was something else. The trees, once bordering the path, now crowded and closer than I remembered, their skeletal branches twisting unnaturally against the sky. The moon was high, casting pale light on the landscape, but everything felt wrong. Like I had stepped into a different world, one where the rules I knew no longer applied. Panic welled up inside me. I turned to look back at the church, but it wasn't the same. The once familiar stone building now looked warped, its walls blackened, twisted as though the very bricks had shifted under some unseen pressure. The cross on the roof bent at a crooked angle, as if weighed down by some invisible force. I stumbled back, my mind scrambling for a rational explanation, but there was none. The church had moved, shifted somehow, or worse, dragged itself to this nightmarish place. I began to run. The trees were dense, their thick branches clawing at my clothes as I pushed through, desperate to find the road, the village, anything familiar. But no matter how far I ran, the forest seemed to stretch endlessly in every direction. The ground beneath my feet was uneven, soft with rot, and I could feel the damp earth sucking at my shoes, as if trying to pull me deeper into its grasp. My breath came in ragged gasps, but I didn't dare stop. The darkness seemed alive, pressing in from all sides, suffocating me with its weight. And then, from somewhere behind me, I heard it, the sound of something moving through the trees. I froze. It wasn't the wind. No, this was something deliberate. A slow, methodical rustling like heavy feet dragging through the underbrush. My skin prickled with terror, and every instinct screamed at me to keep moving. But I couldn't. I had to see what it was. I turned slowly, my heart thudding in my chest, and peered into the shadows. At first, I saw nothing but darkness, the faint glimmer of moonlight filtering through the canopy above. But then, between the twisted trunks of the trees, I saw movement, something large, hulking, shifting in the shadows. It stepped forward just enough for the light to catch it. My blood ran cold. It was tall, too tall to be human, with long, sinewy limbs that stretched unnaturally from its body. Its skin was pale and mottled like decaying flesh, and its face, God, its face, was a grotesque mockery of a human's. Hollow eyes, black as the void, stared straight at me, unblinking. Its mouth hung open, revealing jagged, broken teeth, and from its throat came a low, guttural growl that vibrated through the trees. I took a step back, the ground giving way beneath me, and my ankle twisted painfully. I bit back a scream, forcing myself to stay quiet, but the creature had already seen me. It moved closer, its massive form slithering between the trees with an unnatural grace, its head tilting unervingly to one side as it studied me. I couldn't move. My legs felt like lead, my breath shallow as terror gripped my chest. The creature stopped just at the edge of the clearing, watching, waiting. I felt its gaze on me, its presence like a crushing weight on my soul. I wanted to run, but there was nowhere to go. The forest had swallowed me whole, and now this thing had found me. And then it smiled. A sick, twisted smile that split its face from ear to ear, its jagged teeth glistening in the pale light. I took a step forward. My paralysis broke. Without thinking, I turned and ran, my injured ankle screaming in protest as I tore through the trees, branches whipping at my face and arms. I didn't look back. I couldn't. The sound of the creature's footsteps behind me grew louder, closer, and with it came that horrible, bone-chilling growl. It was hunting me. The forest seemed to shift around me as I ran, the trees bending and twisting as if alive, guiding me deeper into its maze. No matter how fast I went, no matter which direction I turned, I couldn't escape. The creature was always just behind me, its presence a dark, looming shadow that pressed in on my mind. My lungs burned, my vision blurred, and my ankle throbbed with pain, but I kept running, fueled by sheer terror. The church, the village, Father Gavril, all of it faded from my mind. There was only one thought left: survival. But in this place, I wasn't sure survival was even an option. I don't know how long I ran. My lungs screamed for air, my legs burning with each desperate step. My vision blurred as the trees stretched endlessly in every direction. The sound of the creature behind me, its heavy, dragging steps and low, wet growls, echoed in my ears, pushing me forward even though I knew my body was failing. But no matter how fast I moved, I couldn't escape. The forest itself seemed to close in around me, the trees shifting like skeletal hands reaching for me, clawing at my skin. Then just as my legs buckled, the world tipped sideways. I stumbled, tripping over an unseen root, and hit the ground hard. Pain shot through my ankle and my body gave out. I tried to push myself up, but my arms trembled violently, the last of my strength slipping away like water through my fingers. My chest heaved as I gasped for air, the cold earth pressing against my face. And then I felt it, a shadow falling over me, heavy and cold like death itself. I didn't have the strength to move anymore. My limbs felt numb, useless. I could only stare at the ground, my vision narrowing as darkness crept in from the edges. My breath came in shallow, ragged gasps as I lay there, helpless. From the corner of my eye, I saw it. The creature's massive, distorted shape loomed above me. Its grotesque body hovered, twitching unnaturally, as it studied me with those hollow, soulless eyes. My mind screamed at me to run, to get away, but my body refused to obey. I was trapped. I blinked, my vision fading in and out, and through the fog of my exhaustion, I felt the creature's long, gnarled fingers wrap around me. Its skin was cold, the texture rough like dead bark, and the stench of rot filled my nostrils. I wanted to scream, to thrash, to fight, but my body was nothing more than a limp shell. The last thing I saw before my consciousness slipped away was the creature lifting me, its inhuman strength effortless as it cradled me in its arms. The forest spun around me in a whirl of dark shadows, and through the haze I saw it, Zohidka Church, looming in the distance, its twisted stone walls black against the night sky. I was being taken back. I struggled to stay awake, to make sense of the nightmare unraveling around me, but my mind was slipping, sinking into the cold abyss of unconsciousness. The last sensation I felt was the heavy, oppressive air of the church as the creature carried me through its doors. And then everything went black. When I came to, I was no longer in the forest. I blinked, trying to focus through the fog clouding my vision, but the world around me was a blur of dark shapes and swirling shadows. I was moving, my body swaying back and forth as if I was being carried, no dragged. Reality came crashing back with a jolt of terror. The creature had me. Through the haze of fear, I forced my eyes open just enough to see. We were inside the church now, the air thick with the same sickening stench of decay. The walls were closer than before, as if they had twisted and warped into a claustrophobic nightmare. Candles flickered faintly in the darkness, their weak flames casting long, grotesque shadows across the stone. And then I saw it. The creature was holding me in its long skeletal arms, its misshapen body bending in ways that no living thing should. Its eyes were fixed on the altar ahead, but it wasn't just an altar anymore. It was alive, pulsing with a dark, unnatural energy. The chanting I had heard before was louder now, filling the air like a chorus of tortured souls. The very ground beneath me seemed to vibrate with the sound, and through the fog of my fading consciousness, I realized something horrific. I wasn't alone. Figures stood along the walls, human-shaped but distorted, their faces hidden beneath deep, black hoods. They moved in unison, swaying back and forth with the rhythm of the chant, their voices merging with the hum that filled the church. I couldn't see their faces, but I could feel their eyes, watching me, waiting for something. The creature stopped in front of the altar, its head tilting as if listening to the dark whispers that filled the room. I tried to move, but my body was heavy, sluggish. The last thing I saw before the darkness consumed me was the creature lowering me onto the cold stone floor, the chanting growing louder, closer, until it was all I could hear. Then everything went black again. In the days that followed, rumors spread like wildfire through the village of Black Hollow. The people whispered of another soul lost to Zohidka Church, another poor fool who had dared to enter and never returned. Some said it was the curse of Father Gavril's death, that the church had become a gateway to something unspeakable. Others claimed it was the forest itself, alive and hungry, devouring those foolish enough to wander too close. But the truth, as always, was far worse. The villagers spoke in hushed tones, eyes wide with fear, of the things they had seen. Some swore they had spotted a figure, tall and thin, moving through the trees at the edge of the village, a twisted shape that seemed to disappear when they looked too closely. Others said they had heard the chanting, faint but unmistakable, carried on the wind late at night. And then there were those who claimed to have seen the creature itself, something not of this world, a being of shadow and rot, lurking just beyond the veil of reality, waiting for its next victim. No one went near the church anymore. No one dared. But the church remained, standing silently at the edge of the village, watching, waiting.